At 5:42 p.m., the rain pressed a fine hush against the glass of Union Square, and my office smelled like coffee and warm walnut from the break room. My phone lit with my father's name. I answered because habit is older than courage. "Do not come," he said, each word trimmed of warmth. "If you insist on coming, do not call me your father." The click that followed was small and final. I stood still and watched drizzle smear the skyline, the old ache slotting back into place, a toxic family script performed again. 2 banners crossed my screen: Seattle City light payment processed, SPU water payment processed, Xfinity payment processed. 24 months total, $39,768. Then a Zelle request from my mother for $38.47, tagged family-only cake. Numbers do not lie, even when people do. Real daughters do not flaunt salaries, he once told me after church. Office girls push buttons, not real work, he added when I earned a promotion. The voice of family betrayal in our house was always polite. It sounded like advice and landed like a bruise. I opened my banking app and watched the history unfurl in clean lines. Due dates, account numbers, confirmation codes, a quiet story, financial told in digits. "Keep paying and keep the peace," one part of me said. Another part asked why peace required only my account and my silence. Money justice is rarely loud. It is a decision made with steady hands. I tapped Manage Auto Pay. A gray switch waited beside each service like a closed eye. Power off, water off, internet off. 3 emails arrived to confirm. I created a folder named Winslow Bills and moved every receipt into it, PDFs and CSVs, proof that I carried what others pretended to hold. I set a credit freeze because I have learned how fast a name can become a key in the wrong hand. On my calendar, a small star marked November 23rd, my mother's birthday. I opened the note and typed 2 plain words: no pay. They sat on the screen like a river stone, simple and heavy. I remembered the first bill I covered when my father had a health scare and my mother whispered that the lights might go out. I remembered the month my sister Brianna bought a bag on a buy now pay later plan while promising she would help next time. I remembered learning my college account had been emptied for a repair I never agreed to. Financial abuse does not begin with a demand. It begins with a story that sounds reasonable enough to accept. My throat loosened. I was not disowning anyone. I was refusing to disown myself. If love is honest, it does not need my password. If respect is present, it does not need my autopay. The drizzle thickened and the skyline softened until the lights looked like chalk on dark paper. In that blur, I felt something I had not felt in years. Not triumph, not vengeance. A moral awakening, even and warm, the quiet beginning of a boundary. Part of me wanted to call him back and fill the space with reasons to list the meals and rides and clinic visits, to say that revenge emotional is not my aim, and that conflict justice is about truth, not hurt. I did not call. Quiet choices carry farther than speeches. I wrote a single line in my notes: boundaries are a form of care, and saved it. I tested the switch by the door light on light off the bulb, doing its simple job. That is what I wanted with the people who share my name. Pay what is yours. Own what you owe. Keep your promises. The rain gathered its voice on the glass. I wrapped my hands around a mug and let the steam rise to my face. Somewhere in Tacoma, a cake would be cut, and a prayer would be said, and a laugh would travel from kitchen to hall, and none of it would carry my name, because I had been asked to be invisible. I waited for grief to swallow the room. It did not. It paused at the edge and watched me breathe. I opened my laptop and read through the receipts again, not to hurt myself, but to see the care behind every quiet transfer. I saved the folder in 3 places. I set a reminder to check the utilities on the morning after the party. I closed the calendar and let the office settle into its evening hum. Would you choose quiet justice or pay forever to keep the calm? Tell me which one you would choose, and together we will begin reclaiming respect. Tacoma smelled like pine and old rain when I pulled into my parents' driveway that Sunday. The house looked the same, as it always had: beige siding, crooked porch light, the kind of suburban stillness that hides a lifetime of small humiliations. My sister Brianna's car, the silver one with the vanity plate Love, always gleamed in the driveway. I had paid the first down payment on that car without knowing it. When I turned 18, my parents told me they had opened a UGME savings account in my name. It held $12,400 money I earned from summer jobs and scholarships money my mother said she would keep safe until I needed it. Years later, when I asked about it to help with a condo deposit, she laughed softly. "Oh, honey, that went to Brianna's first car. She needed it more. You were already stable. In our house, stability meant you didn't need love, just responsibility." My father's tone that day was the same steady disapproval he reserved for when I fixed things he had broken. "You have the good head for numbers," he said, "so you handle the bills. It suits you." That sentence became my inheritance. I paid the HOA fees when they ran late, sometimes 2 months at a time. I covered my father's $40 Medicare copay for physical therapy. When he strained his shoulder lifting boxes, he refused to let anyone else move. I even helped Brianna with her buy now, pay later plans for purses and shoes, because she swore she'd pay me back when her next paycheck arrived. It never did. She always smiled, said I was the reliable one, the good sister. The words felt like applause and a chain at the same time. Family manipulation does not need shouting. It only needs gratitude that you didn't ask for. One night, while reviewing my monthly statements, I noticed small recurring charges for Amazon and Netflix family plans. When I checked the profiles, I saw familiar names: Mom, Dad, Brianna, and me. Except my card covered every account. I clicked through the watch history, amused and irritated. My mother binging crime dramas, my father watching war documentaries, Brianna's endless line of reality shows. I took screenshots and sent them in the family group chat with a caption that read, "Here is the history of who watches what. Thought you'd appreciate the data." Brianna responded with a single laughing emoji and then a line that said, "You are so dramatic, it is just $10. I removed them from the plan anyway and told them each to start their own. My mother called the next morning. "We do not understand this technology," she said. "Why make life harder?" I smiled into the silence and said, "It is easy. Just enter your own card." There was no thank you, only a sigh long enough to fill the call. Later that week, I checked our shared cell phone bill. One line stood out: Grandma iPad, $30 per month. My grandmother had passed away 5 years earlier. When I asked Brianna about it, she admitted it was her backup tablet for watching shows during work breaks. She added it years ago because the name looked harmless on the statement. I stared at the screen, realizing that family financial abuse often hides behind small jokes. I removed that line, too. My father texted me the next morning. "Why are you changing things at work? Stop controlling." The irony was perfect. I had never controlled anything in that house. I only maintained it. Our Story Financial ran on guilt as its currency. Every month I balanced their mistakes against my salary and called it love. Yet something began to shift in me as I looked at those canceled subscriptions and the silent absence that followed. It felt like breathing air after years underwater. Brianna posted on social media about the inconvenience of adulting, complaining that streaming was expensive now. Her followers laughed. I turned off my phone and let the irritation pass through me. The truth is that revenge story money does not always look like grand gestures. Sometimes it is an ordinary woman in Tacoma, reclaiming her own bank statement. I thought of all the times I had been told that my calm made me difficult to love, that my silence meant indifference. Silence is not love. It is the sound made when someone walks away carrying your self-respect. The notification came while I was finishing a report at work. My phone lit up with a tag from an old friend, a photo from the church hall in Tacoma. The caption said, "Family-only birthday prep," with a line of heart emojis. In the picture, my parents stood near a table of cupcakes, my sister front and center, holding a balloon that said, "Happy birthday, Mom." I scrolled through the comments until I saw one that made my stomach tighten. Someone had written, "Will Clara be there too?" And my friend had tagged me with, "See you soon." The thread stopped there. No one replied. The silence in that space told the whole story. Later that night, I called my mother, pretending not to have seen the post. She answered with the clatter of dishes in the background. "We are keeping it simple this year, just close family," she said. Her tone was bright, but the words were precise. I asked if she needed anything for the house. She sighed and said, "If you want to help, just pay the electric bill. It is due, and your father forgot again." The phrase, "Don't embarrass your mother," floated in between us, unspoken but loud. I hung up and stared at the lights of Seattle reflected in my window, each one burning because someone remembered to pay for it. The next morning, a Zelle notification arrived from her. $200 requested note-reading church bake sale support gift cards bought at Target. I sent nothing back. Instead, I checked my Costco account. I had added her as a secondary cardholder years ago. It was harmless then, a way for her to pick up groceries when she needed. The membership fee renewed automatically from my card. I removed her name, quietly clicked save, and thought no more about it. 2 days later, she called from the checkout line, voice sharp. "They said my card does not work. What did you do?" I said calmly, "I paid the renewal, but only for one user. I can add you again if you send me your half." The pause stretched. She muttered something about ungrateful daughters and hung up. I imagined her standing there, the cashier, watching the mix of confusion and pride that makes people cruel. It should have made me feel guilty, but it didn't. I had drawn a border. $50 was my new maximum for helping without being erased. The next week, Brianna texted that the internet at the house was slow again. I logged into my Xfinity account, the same one I had set up when I was still living there. The name on the account was Brianna Winslow, but the auto payment card number was mine. She had told me once that it was just easier this way, so she didn't have to remember due dates. I canceled the card, updated the address, and removed my information. Within an hour, she called, her voice layered with fake sweetness. "Did you change something? The Wi-Fi stopped working?" I said evenly. "Maybe it is time the billing matches the name." She laughed, a high sound that ended quickly. "Dad said you are being dramatic again." I hung up. The word dramatic has always been the family's weapon for silencing any hint of boundaries. It turned every act of self-respect into an inconvenience for others. That night, I sat on my couch and opened the church group page again. My mother had posted a new photo captioned, "So blessed to celebrate with family." In the background, I could see the electric lights over the dining table, the same fixtures I had paid for glowing above people who had decided I was too inconvenient to invite. The mix of betrayal and calm in my chest felt strange, almost mathematical. I could track every instance of family betrayal with a dollar amount. Each electric bill, each grocery run, each subscription became a line item in a private ledger of silence. I poured myself tea and thought about how many people mistake financial control for love. Conflict justice is rarely loud. It is the quiet act of cutting ties with precision. I smiled at the absurdity of it, all the bake sale, the gift cards, the performance of generosity that still ended in my inbox as a bill. It was almost funny in a dark domestic way. When I closed my laptop, I felt the quiet grow around me, not lonely, but deliberate. If love in that house needed my credit card to function, then maybe it was never love. When family needs my card to breathe, perhaps it is no longer family. The next wave came quiet and familiar. My father called one evening while I was organizing receipts for a quarterly report. His voice carried that sharp patience he used when pretending to teach. "Be a real daughter first," he said. "You talk about business and leadership, but you cannot even take care of simple things." His simple things were the property taxes on their Tacoma house, short $312, because my mother had used the money I sent for her prescription copays to buy a set of kitchen curtains she called an investment in comfort. I asked why they had not told me before the due date. He sighed. "We should not have to remind you to be part of this family." The phrase "part of this family" landed like a tax I could never stop paying. Brianna joined the chorus 2 days later. She texted after work, adding a message that read, "My HR friend says companies notice when employees act cold to their families online. Maybe you should post more positive things." It was not advice. It was a warning wrapped in sugar. I replied with a thumbs up and muted the chat. When I logged into my account that weekend, I saw a pattern that looked like fingerprints left by entitlement. $8 late fees on water, $25 on power, repeating in neat monthly lines. I paid them without comment before thinking it would stop bigger chaos. Now I just looked at them. Every tiny charge was a receipt of neglect labeled family. Then something stranger appeared. A friend from high school sent me a link. It was a GoFundMe titled "Help Martin Recover." The description spoke about my father's courage through illness, his loving wife, his supportive daughters. My own photograph filled the banner, an image of me holding his hand from a hospital visit 2 years ago. The caption under it said, "Our caring daughter always by his side." They had cropped out the IV pole and the exhaustion on my face, turning real pain into a donation campaign. My mother had written the updates, my sister shared them. They had not asked permission. The money went directly into my father's account. I read every comment, strangers offering prayers and small amounts of cash. It felt like standing outside my own life. The family that ignored me in person had used my image to collect sympathy online. Financial abuse changes masks, but it keeps the same eyes. I took a screenshot and opened the site's copyright form. It took less than 5 minutes to report unauthorized use. The next morning, an email confirmed the campaign was under review for removal. By afternoon, it was gone. That night, Brianna called furious. "How could you do that?" "People were helping," I said calmly. "Helping who?" She hung up after muttering that I never understood compassion. An hour later, my mother sent a long text about shame and how airing family issues made us look bad. I didn't respond. Revenge story money sometimes looks like silence that forces others to face their own reflection. A week after the campaign disappeared, I received a letter from a credit monitoring agency. Someone had attempted to open a department store card using my Social Security number. The application was denied because my credit was frozen. I remember doing that after turning off the auto pays, a small act of foresight that now felt like armor. I filed the letter away in the Winslow Bills folder, another line of evidence that boundaries protect more than feelings. The world had not ended. The utilities were paid, the lights stayed on in Tacoma, and no one thanked me. Instead, they adjusted the story. My father told relatives I had become too proud. My sister hinted I might be having emotional problems. The toxic routine was intact, only the channels had changed. Yet something new grew under the surface. Not anger, but clarity. I stopped defending myself. I let them tell their stories while I built my own. I looked again at the balance sheets of our entanglement and felt a kind of calm precision. Conflict justice was not about winning arguments, it was about reclaiming the narrative hidden inside each transaction. Late fees, taxes, medical bills, every number revealed where respect had evaporated. Brianna stopped sending small requests after the GoFundMe vanished. My mother avoided direct calls, sending group messages instead. The silence was peaceful in its honesty. One evening, I poured tea and sat by the window watching the city fade into amber. Betrayal, family karma. I thought comes not from curses, but from balance restored. When deceit loses its stage, truth lights up the room. I learned that manipulators need darkness. Receipts are the only light they fear. It was a gray afternoon at Denny's, the kind of place where the smell of frying oil and coffee feels like a memory. My mother slid into the booth across from me, tugging at her cardigan as if the air conditioning had personally offended her. I had suggested meeting halfway between Tacoma and Seattle, neutral ground, easy parking. She began with a sigh. "You know I'm not getting any younger." It was her opening for every negotiation. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A Zelle request from her name, $38.47. "Note for dinner tonight since you are better off." I looked at the message, then at her face, perfectly composed. I nodded and said softly, I will cover my meal and the tip." She smiled the way people do when they think they have won something. When the check came, I paid my part and left a generous tip for the waitress who'd been juggling 4 tables alone. My mother watched disapproval folded neatly into her expression. On the way out, she said, "A good daughter would not make her mother feel small." I answered, "A good mother would not send invoices between bites of lunch." We walked to the parking lot in silence. Family manipulation is quiet in public, only loud when the door closes. That evening, a cousin texted me from Florida. She had heard from my father that I had changed, that I was distant. She wrote, "Remember, filial duty has no interest rate." I stared at the message, wondering how often toxic ideas travel faster than truth. I did not reply. Instead, I opened my cell phone account and reviewed the family plan. I had been paying for 4 lines for years. I separated mine into a new account, leaving the rest under their names, with a detailed bill showing exactly which number belonged to whom. I emailed the document to both my parents, labeling each section clearly. The next morning, Brianna texted, "Did you really have to make a spreadsheet about family?" I smiled and attached the Excel file winslowbills.xlsx to the group chat. Every person had their costs highlighted in red. It looked clinical and final. Within minutes, my father sent a message saying, "You make everything so complicated." I replied, "Transparency is simple. It ends arguments." That afternoon, my Aunt Marjorie called. Her voice carried that hesitant kindness of someone who still believes peace can be brokered. She asked if I had plans for Mom's birthday. I said no, I had not been invited. A pause filled the line. "Well, they are planning something at the church, a surprise." She exhaled, "You did not hear it from me." Of course I had not. The surprise party would be another stage where I did not exist. I thanked her for telling me anyway. After we hung up, I sat at my desk and stared at the open spreadsheet. Each red cell glowed faintly on the screen like small warning lights. Story financial patterns have a rhythm. It starts with a sigh about age, then a bill disguised as affection, followed by a speech about gratitude. I had lived inside that rhythm for years. I thought about how my mother's Zelle request matched the price of a single diner meal, yet carried the weight of a lifetime of control. Revenge emotional is not anger, it is recognition. I felt no need to defend myself anymore. I printed a copy of the bill breakdown and placed it in the Winslow folder with the rest of the evidence, not because I wanted to use it, but because having truth in writing steadies the mind. That night, Brianna posted a quote online about how some people forget where they came from. Dozens of likes followed. I scrolled past it and opened my email drafts, typing a short note to myself. Respect begins when expenses are no longer invisible. I saved it for later. Outside, the lights of Seattle blinked through the mist like small signals of endurance. The city kept paying its own way, quietly, predictably, no emotional invoices attached. The rain began before sunset, a heavy Pacific downpour that wrapped the city in sound. Inside my apartment, the only light came from the small brass lamp on my kitchen table, its reflection soft against the stack of envelopes and printed receipts spread before me. The refrigerator hummed steadily behind my chair, the familiar background noise of solitude. I opened my laptop and started sorting through 24 months of bills. Each line in the spreadsheet told a story, every transaction a small confession of how I had allowed duty to replace respect. The total made my throat tighten. $39,768 in utilities, groceries, and quiet rescues. I saved the files under a single name, accountabilitypacket.pdf, and added screenshots of messages and Zelle requests as proof. I wanted a complete record of what had been taken without acknowledgement. My hands moved automatically neat and steady the way I worked when the truth felt too sharp to touch. Outside, the rain grew louder, tapping against the glass like a metronome. For a long time, I stared at the spreadsheet. If I turned off the auto payments, my mother would call in embarrassment, my father would curse about ungrateful daughters. The thought made my stomach twist. But if I kept them on, I would lose the last pieces of self-respect I had left. I imagined the conversation that would follow either choice and realized both versions ended in blame. Somewhere between those outcomes lay the only kind of justice I could control. I checked my email for the latest bank notifications and enabled alerts for any transaction above $1. I registered for USPS Informed Delivery so I could see every envelope headed to my mailbox. Then I reviewed my check systems report, making sure no new accounts had been opened in my name. These small acts of vigilance were the armor people rarely talk about, the quiet preparation for emotional survival. I picked up my phone and stared at the home screen. The family group chat sat at the top, unread messages piling up about errands and gossip. I tapped the focus settings and renamed it Respect Only. Then I turned off their notifications completely. From now on, I decided we communicate through email only. A small boundary, but one that meant something. I deleted the group from my favorites list and felt an unexpected lightness. The hour hand moved past 9. I printed the packet and placed it in a folder marked Winslow 2025. My signature looked firm at the bottom of the summary page, a personal contract to stop financing my own erasure. I opened the calendar on my phone and scrolled to November 23rd, my mother's birthday. The date glowed quietly in gray. I added a note in the same calm tone I used for meetings at work, autopay termination effective this day. My heart pounded once, then steadied. I closed the laptop and listened to the rain push harder against the windows, the sound of something washing itself clean. The refrigerator clicked, lights flickered slightly, and I imagined the silence that would fall over their house when the payments stopped. It was not vengeance, it was math finally balancing. I wrote in my journal, "Boundaries are a form of care, not punishment." The sentence looked simple, but felt like freedom. I turned off the lamp, letting the darkness settle around the kitchen, and whispered quietly to no one, "I am not their provider. I am their daughter." Moral awakening often begins at a table surrounded by receipts. Story financial justice is not glamorous. It is paperwork and courage in equal measure. I exhaled long and slow until my shoulders relaxed. Tomorrow I would wake up and go to work like usual. The world would not change, but my place in it would. Sometimes the bravest act is not saying no out loud, but ending the transaction that pretends to be love. Have you ever set boundaries with love? Tell me about the moment you chose dignity over money. At exactly 6:12 that evening, the house in Tacoma smelled of roast turkey cinnamon candles and the sweet fatigue of celebration. I stood near the entryway watching my family laugh around the table, each of them wearing the same performance of belonging. Denise, my mother, clinked her glass and said she felt blessed to have everyone together. Everyone, of course, did not include me in the official sense. I had shown up quietly invited by Aunt Marjorie, who whispered that it would be cruel to keep me away again. Brianna's boyfriend, Ethan, had come too tall and polite, helping set up the Bluetooth karaoke system that streamed from her phone to the big television. The screen glowed with the song Q Pop Hits scrolling across the display. I stood beside the counter, sipping water, listening to my father joke about how some people only remember family when holidays arrive. His laughter filled the room. I smiled thinly. Outside, the November rain had eased to a drizzle, the windows fogged with heat. The turkey timer dinged and the oven light flickered. For a moment, I thought I heard a low hum from the wall, but brushed it off. My mother's phone buzzed with another notification. She ignored it, too busy arranging pies for pictures. When the moment came, it happened fast. A low pop, then silence. The lights snapped off, the hum of the oven died, the music cut mid-lyric. For a heartbeat, everyone froze in the dark. Then the television, still connected to Brianna's phone, blinked back to life, showing a white banner across the top. Seattle City Light account. Past due service suspended. The words glowed bright against the black screen, enormous and unmistakable. Someone gasped. My father cursed under his breath. The banner stayed for a full 10 seconds before the screen went blank again. The entire room smelled faintly of extinguished heat. Brianna's phone chimed once more, and the same alert flashed on her lock screen. She scrambled to hide it, but it was too late. Ethan leaned forward to read his face pale in the candlelight. He looked at me, then at her, then back again. "Wait, Clara Winslow. Fremont Tech," he said slowly. "She's my boss." The room went completely still. Even the refrigerator had stopped humming. My father opened his mouth, but no words came. I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and pressed the side button to wake the screen. The same notification shone there too, but mine carried no surprise. I stepped forward, voice calm and steady. I paid those bills for 24 months. Tonight I stopped. I turned toward my mother. "I am giving back my respect. It is not a gift you can request through Zelle." The words landed without force, just simple truth. The silence that followed was heavy enough to make the air feel solid. A neighbor from across the street peeked through the open doorway, curious about the blackout. Behind him, someone whispered, "So she was the one paying all this time." More murmurs followed, spreading like slow fire. My father's face flushed deep red, a mixture of anger and shame. My mother blinked fast, as if searching for a script that could erase the scene. Brianna stood frozen, clutching her phone. Ethan stepped back quietly, setting down his glass of wine. No one sang, no one clapped. The candles cast uneven shadows across the walls, their flicker catching the nervous twitch of every guilty glance. The smell of half-cooked turkey filled the kitchen. I watched the realization bloom across their faces, the dawning recognition that the silent provider they mocked had simply stopped. It was not vengeance, it was arithmetic. Family betrayal looks theatrical only to those who have never balanced the ledger. I gathered my coat from the chair and turned toward the door. Behind me, I heard my mother say softly, "Clara, wait," but she did not move. I paused just long enough to answer. "The lights will come back when the balance does." Outside, the air was cold and sharp. The sky hung low, the streets slick with reflection. I could still hear the muffled voices inside disbelief, mixing with the distant laughter of neighbors who now knew the truth. Betrayal family karma had arrived quietly wrapped in a power outage. As I walked to my car, I felt neither triumph nor sorrow, only the clean stillness of completion. Some debts are settled not with money, but with exposure. Tonight the receipts had spoken louder than I ever could. The aftermath unfolded like the slow drip of a faucet that would not stop. By Monday, the Tacoma HOA had issued a formal notice to my parents for the noise and lighting violations from the blackout. $150 in penalties for excessive disturbance and non-compliance with exterior lighting standards. The irony was exquisite. The house that once shone like a beacon of family virtue was now cited for darkness. My father ranted about bureaucrats and unfair systems, his favorite language when consequences arrived. Comcast followed next, sending an email to the account that was now fully in Brianna's name. Service restoration fee $75, equipment replacement charge for unreturned modem $200. She had claimed it was lost to avoid responsibility. Now she owed it back with interest. The same morning, the church bulletin circulated. A small note at the bottom read, "The volunteer committee has paused all activities, pending review of donation imagery." That polite sentence meant Brianna had been quietly removed from the charity group after the GoFundMe incident resurfaced. Someone from the board had seen the campaign before it vanished and asked why an unrelated corporate photo of a daughter was used to raise money. My mother called crying. "They are humiliating us." I said gently, "No, they are just asking questions." Later that week, my father went to a payday lender to keep up appearances with the neighbors, borrowing $600 to cover bills until his next pension deposit. The interest was nearly 400%. By the time Denise found out, the balance had already multiplied. She left a voicemail filled with panic, her voice trembling between guilt and exhaustion. I listened once and deleted it. Money justice has no need for revenge when math does the work. At Fremont Tech, I kept my focus on year-end audits. Ethan transferred to another department within a month. He did not mention the dinner again. The only evidence of that night was the cautious respect in his tone whenever we crossed paths. He treated me like someone who had drawn a boundary too clean to challenge. Around the same time, I prepared the final version of my accountability packet. I attached the PDF to an email addressed to the core of our extended family, my Aunt Marjorie, 2 uncles, and a few cousins, who had grown up hearing the myth that I was the cold one. The message was brief: transparency for future reference. Every figure in that document was verified and time-stamped a record of 24 months of financial rescue disguised as filial duty. The next day, Aunt Marjorie called. Her voice carried the quiet awe of someone reading a story backward and realizing who the hero was. "Clara, you saved that house more times than they admit." I did not answer right away. It was not saving. It was enabling. But thank you. By the end of the week, the family's narrative had shifted. Cousins who once teased me for being distant now spoke in careful tones about fairness and boundaries. My father stopped calling. My mother texted short updates about the weather and health stripped of demands. Even silence can sound like respect when compared to years of manipulation. Brianna posted vague quotes online about forgiveness and personal growth. The comments section was half sympathy, half skepticism. She had lost her volunteer circle, her credibility, and parts of her relationship with Ethan. In every photograph, her smile looked a little tighter. The fallout was not loud or cinematic. It was administrative. Bills, fines, and social recalibration, the kind that leaves permanent dents rather than explosions. Conflict justice rarely needs spectacle. It only requires documentation. I printed one last copy of the accountability packet and placed it in a fireproof box under my desk. I did not want revenge anymore. What I wanted was distance measurable in both miles and receipts. As the weeks passed, the noise around me softened. Winter came. The city lights reflected on wet pavement, steady and honest. Betrayal family karma had done its job without me lifting another finger. The balance restored itself through ordinary consequences. I wrote a note in my journal that night. Truth does not need to shout. It only needs a bill with my name off it. It was early January when the knock came at my door. Rain streaked the windows of my Capitol Hill condo, the kind that made the city feel smaller and more intimate than it was. Through the peephole, I saw them standing side by side, my father holding a suitcase, my mother clutching a grocery bag like an apology. When I opened the door, she smiled nervously. "We thought maybe we could talk," she said, her voice trembling between guilt and hope. I stepped aside, letting them in. The smell of their cologne and cheap coffee filled the living room. They looked around at the clean, minimal space as if trying to find something to criticize. My father finally said, "You have done well for yourself." Then his tone shifted softer but rehearsed. "We came to say sorry for how things turned out. Family makes mistakes." My mother nodded quickly, eyes darting. "But we need a bit of help just until we fix our credit. $2,000 a month." I sat down at the dining table, folded my hands, and looked at them both. "You want $2,000 every month," I repeated slowly. My father nodded, already defensive. "It is temporary. I have some issues with the loan company after that blackout nonsense." I took a deep breath, then opened my laptop. "If you want help, we can formalize it. Brianna can contribute 50%. We will sign a notarized support agreement with a set end date and shared accountability. Or if you prefer, you can transfer the house title to me with a quitclaim deed once the lien is cleared. That way, the debt is properly exchanged for equity." My mother blinked as if the words were another language. My father's face turned crimson. "This is family," he snapped. "You are turning love into paperwork." I met his eyes, calm and steady. "You already turned love into invoices. I am just making it balanced." He stood up so fast the chair scraped across the floor. "You think you are better than us because of your job, because you know numbers." I said quietly, "No, I think numbers keep people honest." He reached for the teapot on the table and slammed it down, spilling half of it across the smart plug connected to the lamp. Sparks flickered, the lights blinked twice, and the room went dim. My mother gasped. For a second, everything froze except the smell of scorched plastic. Then someone knocked from the hallway. A neighbor's voice called, "Everything okay in there?" I answered without turning my head. "Just a minor spill. We are fine." My father's breathing filled the silence, loud and uneven. He looked around the room, his anger slowly collapsing into something smaller, something like exhaustion. My mother started crying softly, muttering that this was all getting too complicated. I unplugged the lamp and placed a towel over the spill. The absurdity of it all made me almost laugh. Even my smart home had shut itself off out of self-respect. I faced them again. "When you have clarity and respect, I am willing to talk. Until then, please leave." My father stared at me as if testing whether I would flinch. When I didn't, he picked up the suitcase. My mother hesitated, whispering, "She used to be such a sweet girl." I said quietly, "She still is, she just learned what fairness costs." They left without another word. The hallway light reflected on the wet streaks their shoes had left behind. I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling the weight of what just happened settle like quiet thunder. For the first time in years, my home felt like my own. I sat down, opened my journal, and wrote a question. When family asks for more than love, what do you give back, truth or compliance? Standing up for yourself does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop being currency. Lesson in betrayal complete. I thought then smiled without bitterness. The room was still dim, but it was mine. Which would you choose, equal share, written contract, or inheritance? Within 2 months, the storm that had begun as a quiet act of refusal had settled into something far more tangible. The unpaid utility balances were sent to collections, and the credit score attached to my father's name plummeted into the low 500s. The HOA posted a lien warning on their public notice board for non-payment of the neighborhood dues, an embarrassment he could not hide from the neighbors who had once admired his pride. On Nextdoor, the community app where gossip thrived, threads appeared under the title "Power Outage on Oak Ridge Drive." People speculated about what had really happened that night. Someone wrote that it had been a moral blackout rather than a technical one. For the first time in my life, public opinion was not in their favor. Brianna tried to keep up her polished image online, but her employer at the PR agency rescinded her pending offer after a quiet background review uncovered the GoFundMe incident. She had listed charitable leadership among her credentials, unaware that the image takedown request had made its way through Google's legal department. Within weeks, her name was whispered among colleagues as a cautionary tale about authenticity. The church board that once adored her asked for a written apology to be printed in the Sunday Bulletin. It read like a press release stripped of emotion. I read it once, then set it aside. My mother, always caught between pride and denial, reacted in the only way she knew how. She began liking my photos on social media again, timid digital gestures of reconciliation. The strangest one came on a quiet Thursday night. I had uploaded an album titled Quiet Boundaries, a single photograph of a red maple tree outside my apartment window. The caption said nothing. She reacted with a heart. It made me smile, not from joy, but from the absurdity of it. There she was, tapping approval on a symbol of the distance she helped create. Life itself was poetic in its irony. Meanwhile, I began to heal in small ways. I went back to therapy at a clinic in Ballard, sitting across from a counselor who never asked me to explain the math of betrayal. She simply asked how it felt to breathe without obligation. I started running again around Green Lake, counting each lap as a measure of reclaiming time. In the evenings, I cooked salmon with lemon and dill, the kitchen filled with steady light from fixtures I paid for with my own earnings. No outages, no begging for gratitude, just warmth that stayed on because I chose it. I printed a single check for $50 made out to my parents and mailed it with a note. Monthly repayment plan for lessons learned. The humor was quiet, the kind that only I needed to understand. It was my version of gentle revenge, a symbolic gesture to teach value through consistency. I did not expect them to cash it. What mattered was that the act existed. The money justice was complete, but the emotional one took its time. Some nights I still replayed old conversations, hearing the tone of dismissal in my father's voice, the subtle manipulation in my mother's sighs. Yet the ache dulled faster than expected. Each mile run and each dinner cooked replaced it with something steadier. Family betrayal had taken years to form, but recovery began the moment I decided I was no longer their silent resource. I was a person with boundaries and receipts, both emotional and financial. One evening, I stood by my window watching the maple leaves shift in the wind. The reflection of my kitchen light flickered softly on the glass, not from failure, but from rhythm. That subtle shimmer felt like proof that life had finally evened out. I whispered quietly to the empty room, "I am not an emotional ATM anymore." The words hung in the air long after the sound faded, and for once silence felt like peace rather than punishment. By February, the Seattle sky had softened into its rare winter light, a muted gold that slipped through clouds like forgiveness. I met Aunt Marjorie at Victrola Coffee on Pike Street, the place she liked, because it reminded her of when we used to dream of city lives beyond Tacoma. She waved from a corner table, already sipping her cappuccino. Beside her sat my father, looking older and smaller. Then I remembered the edges of his confidence worn down. My mother was not with him. When I approached, he stood but didn't meet my eyes right away. The hum of espresso machines filled the silence between us. Marjorie excused herself to order another drink, giving us space. He cleared his throat. "I did not come here to argue," he said, his voice low. "I just wanted to explain. We were ashamed. People talk in small towns. I didn't want anyone to think I failed my family." His confession hung there thin but real. I nodded slowly. "Shame has an odd way of guiding people," I said. "It makes them call cruelty protection." He looked down at his hands, turning his coffee cup in circles. "We never meant to hurt you, Clara. Maybe we were scared you would stop needing us." I pulled a brown envelope from my bag and placed it on the table. Inside were two things: a printed copy of the accountability packet, each page stamped and organized by date, and a support agreement template with signature lines for both parents and Brianna. The instructions were simple. If you want financial help, sign this document. If you don't, we will keep only emotional contact. No money, no guilt. He scanned the papers, his eyes flicking between the columns of numbers and legal terms. "So this is what love looks like to you now," he murmured. I answered softly, "No, this is what respect looks like. The rest is still love if you let it be." He sat back silent. Outside the window, a sliver of sunlight touched the rain-soaked pavement, reflecting in soft glows. For a moment, he smiled, faint and uncertain, and I knew that was as much peace as either of us would get today. When Marjorie returned, she sensed the conversation's end and began talking about her garden instead. I listened, feeling something uncoil in my chest. After they left, I stayed to finish my tea. The envelope sat unopened on the table, and I did not reach for it. Some stories end not with reconciliation, but with clarity. That was enough. I texted Maya, a friend from the office. "Evening walk, Cary Park." She replied instantly, "I'll bring cocoa." By the time I reached the overlook, the city stretched below like a calm sea of light. From there, Seattle looked small, contained as if every piece of chaos in my life had shrunk into something understandable. The wind was cold but kind, brushing against my hair like a quiet applause. I thought about the past year, the numbers, the power outage, the silence that followed. Every choice had been a kind of truth, and truth always costs something. I whispered into the wind, was I wrong? The question carried no bitterness, only curiosity. If love can exist only when money flows, maybe it isn't love at all. Below the Space Needle gleamed faintly a reminder that light survives even the longest storms. I turned my phone to airplane mode and let the moment stay unrecorded. That night, as I walked home, I felt a steady calm I had never known. No fireworks, no vengeance, only quiet justice unfolding in its natural rhythm. It was the ending I didn't know I was strong enough to choose. You believe in quiet justice, don't you? Have you ever stood up for yourself with dignity over money, chosen revenge through truth, to reclaim respect? May your strength bring emotional resilience and justice without hate. The moral awakening begins the moment you choose peace over permission.